what is the NYAY scheme? Could you explain it so that everyone understands what it is?
See, the NYAY scheme is actually quite simple. The poorest 5 crore Indian families will get 6,000 rupees a month or 72,000 rupees a year. They get the same amount of money. Every one of these 5 crore poorest, 20% of India's poorest families. That is really what the NYAY scheme is about.
But it's implemented.
What it means is, we know that today, on average, the monthly income of a poorest Indian, of the poorest in the 20% of Indian families, is about 6,000 rupees. The average income today is about 6,000 rupees. So you give them an additional 6,000 rupees. So their average income now then will become 12,000 rupees. So that is why we say that the minimum income line in India will become 12,000 rupees after NYAY scheme. That does not mean we are giving 12,000 rupees. We are giving 6,000 rupees, the same amount of money to every family of the poorest 20% or 5 crore families. So from this, 25 crore Indians will benefit.
How do you plan to implement this scheme? So there are many who say that all the existing schemes will be taken away. You will combine all of the schemes. You'll have to stop a lot of schemes. But from where will the money come for the scheme is, I believe, what most of them are asking.
Sure. Let us understand this in the larger context. At its peak, the NYAY scheme will cost 3.6 lakh crores, which is 1.8% of today's GDP. The NYAY scheme will be rolled out in phases, and by the end of the second year, we would cover all the 5 crore families, by which time GDP would have grown. So it would at its peak be between 1.2% to 1.5% of GDP, which is actually not a large sum, because India's GDP today is 200 lakh crores. State and center combined today spend 60 lakh crores already. We are talking about 3.5 lakh crores for the poorest 20%. It is very easily doable. The money is there.
Did you anticipate the kind of criticism that NYAY has got? Did you anticipate that?
See, honestly, I think NYAY as an economic idea is a well accepted and idea which has received endorsements from all over the world. I think the skepticism around fiscal, what it will do, or around its fiscal impact and what it can do to our fiscal balance, as well as some implementation, is there. But honestly, I don't think that is something that we should worry about too much, simply because, as Mr. Chidambaram says, there was a very similar skepticism around NREGA when it was launched 10 years ago. I understand why people are apprehensive. I wouldn't even call it skepticism, I wouldn't call it criticism. I think the word to describe this is apprehension. But this is an idea that was first proposed in the Indian context by Arvind Subramanian, the former chief economic advisor of this government, who argued that the time has come for India to adopt a basic minimum income. The only difference is Arvind's proposal was to give 1,500 rupees a month to 15 crore families. It is our political call to say that 5 crore Indians, to escape the poverty cycle, will need a significantly larger amount than a mere 1,500 rupees, and hence we said we will give a larger sum to the poorest 20%. Okay, that is the difference.
There are also doubts and confusions about how you will identify this poor, whether if I can bribe officials and be also included in this, or whether if you strengthen the programs like NREGA, that will also let money flow into them.
See, this identification is a little overblown in my view, the issue. The fact of the matter is, today there are a lot of government schemes already that say Ayushman Bharat, for example, will be for 10 crore poorest families. How do they identify 10 crore poorest families? How do we identify people for PDS? There are schemes that today already work on identification and targeting. Second, there has been a lot of advancements in data science, as well as some new data sets that are available that make it much easier to identify the poorest 5 crore families in India today than it was possible even 10 years ago. So I do think that it is possible to identify the poorest 5 crore families.
Would it also include identifying migrant laborers, people who live, like there are a lot of people who live under bridges and flyovers?
The poorest 5 crore families can be identified, will be identified wherever they are. This scheme does not distinguish between urban poor or rural poor, between landed poor or landless poor, between poor belonging to a certain caste versus poor belonging to another caste. It does not distinguish between any. It's the poorest 5 crore families.
So migrant laborers would be identified as?
Absolutely. Don't forget that we do have other things like Aadhaar and other databases today that is national. Even if people migrate, that Aadhaar number is portable across the country.
It will not be dependent on the Aadhaar so that they get the benefits?
No, it is not dependent. But please remember, we are at a manifesto stage. We are not writing a cabinet note for implementation. So I always find it very curious that people ask so many questions about us. But when Ayushman Bharat was introduced, even today nobody knows how it works. Or when the Prime Minister says, I will double farmers' incomes, till today nobody knows the maths.
There are a lot of people who apprehend that there would be a lot of corruption in this. So how to get income certificates? So how can you counter those fears?
No, there's a lot of presumption here that you need an income certificate and all of those things. It's not. I think, like I said, apprehension is good, is healthy. We are very happy to be held to higher standards and asked all these questions. But I do think it's very premature to talk about all these things such as income certificates. And this issue of corruption or identification of to me it sounds like an excuse or an alibi to not do what is right, which is to wipe out the last remains of poverty in India. At the time of independence, 70% of India's population was poor. We've done spectacularly well to bring that down to 20% today. Now it's time to remove those last remains of 20% poverty.
You would have discussed the desirability of giving cash over improving opportunities and training for the poorest. What made you choose giving cash over training?
I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. That is, you do one and you can't do the other. See, the simple reason why are we doing this? It is now clear world over that economic growth, headline GDP growth, does not translate into real incomes and improvement in livelihoods for the poorest and the weakest sections of society. Trickle down benefits of economic growth is a little exaggerated. It does not reach the bottommost, for which you need a direct policy intervention for the poorest. That is what this is about. And you give them cash, which is unconditional in nature and direct. It also gives them economic freedom, gives them choice, gives them dignity, gives them self-respect. This allows them to participate then in the mainstream economic activity that is available for the remainder of the 80% of the population, and hence they can also then get a chance to actually play in this playground. Right now they are being excluded from this playground.
And why women? you have said that the benefits would be transferred to the women. So
sure. Yes, that's an important point that you raised. So thank you. The money will be transferred into the bank account of the woman head of the household, and it is now well established that women perhaps make better decisions for the family than the male in the household, and it is also well established that money in the woman's account does lead to more productive outcomes and uses of that money, and hence the choice of women. So,
do you think one of the things that you said is having this cash would push the economy? Do you think this could also have been achieved by infrastructure growth, putting money in healthcare, education, and in?
Yes, we have called it the remonetization of India's economy, or I call it the note vapasi, because you put money back in the hands of people. Now, again, I want to say that the two are not mutually exclusive. Putting money back in the hands of people does not preclude us from investing in infrastructure, investments in healthcare and education. We've made it very categorically clear that we are not going to touch any of the existing core welfare programs, including health, education, NREGA, food, fuel, fertilizer programs. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive to each other.
The other criticism is, of course, directed at finding the resources. You have indicated that the size of the economy to buttress the capacity of the state to fund the scheme. Others point to income tax collections amounting to only 2% of the GDP. Would you like to address these concerns?
See, again, like I said, a 1.2 to 1.5% of GDP expenditure is not enormous in today's India, because this is pretty much what the Arvind Subramanian proposal also talked about, which is a very similar expenditure pattern. The question about how we will raise the revenues, how we will raise the money for this, is it through some additional revenue streams, is it through rationalization of some expenditure? The few things that we've clearly said is it will be a federal scheme, it will be a center and state scheme. The Congress President is also committed that we will be fiscally prudent. It is our belief that it is possible to find the money for this through a combination of various, through increased revenues, rationalization, involvement of the states, and a boost that we can get in overall economic growth.
Shouldn't wealth tax be one of the things?
Again, like I said, it's getting into detail. We're not writing a cabinet note for implementation. We're at the manifesto stage.
There are many who oppose this, saying that this will turn many of the poor very lazy and they would not want to work for the rest of the money. How can you counter that?
Yeah, see, I think it is smacks of elitist arrogance to just say that a poor family that will be given 6,000 rupees a month in today's India to barely survive will turn lazy and not participate in the labor force. It is absolutely devoid of any evidence as well. There are plenty of research papers, including by economists in MIT, that have used examples and showed that at this income level, it does not have any impact on participation in the labor force among the poor.